As mentioned in my previous Berserk manga chapter reviews on the channel, if it took another 4 to 5 month hiatus for the next chapter to release, I'm all for it as long as we get fantastic results. That is exactly what came to pass, and my optimism and anticipation for 377's release was rewarded with back-to-back chapters within 2 weeks. Now, I originally planned to upload this analysis around the time of release. As you can see here, the thumbnail was already generated. Yet unfortunately, for all who tune into the channel specifically for Berserk content, this chapter fell on the weekend with prior engagements planned for the family. And as a result, I plan to take time working on editing and uploading the preceding week, but once there was word of 378 dropping on November 8th during that time, I thought this might be a great opportunity to hold off and consolidate all of my thoughts within the last weeks into one. So for those who've already read and or don't want to stick around for another recap of 377, you may want to skip the first half of this video and tune into the portion that start going in on 378. I'll provide a timestamp on the screen to navigate, or you can browse the chapters in the description to be more precise. Otherwise, those who don't mind taking in my thoughts in full on the last 2 releases, you are more than welcome to, and you're really appreciated. Now that you're in the know, and I fulfilled my duties as a family man for the time being, it's Birkin time! Nah, I'm just kidding. Load it up. Yo. Now, this cover art for 377 has got to be the most unique and well thought out of the pieces. Studio Gaga seems to have found this little sweet spot in making the cover visually summarize what is to take place during these chapters. But mainly, this piece helps highlight the other characters who will likely take center stage while Guts is indisposed. Willingly, of course. All of these characters are Kushan, and they all look like nobility or military. The first page of the chapter goes straight into the shock value of the crew amazed by the presence of elephants. A pretty significant scene given that most of the people on Rajek's boat were inhabitants of Elfhelm and the Black Swordsman crew, while the rest were citizens of Windham. They do not have the experience with such creatures like those who were in the military and fought against Ganishka's forces. The most terrified of them all is Ishidro, and with good measure, because he has experience being attacked by creatures who are controlled by Kushan sorcerers. For instance, the tigers in the ballroom of Vertanis, and the alligators sent to attack them at the beach house. In relation to the real world, elephants are native to Africa and South Asia, and since most of our protagonists hail from European-based setting like Windham or Midland, they're not used to seeing such creatures like elephants, unlike the Kushan who were based in the Indian subcontinent. So it comes to no surprise of Ishidro's shock and skepticism in a very funny instance of the artist making his reaction a rendition of the soy jack pointing meme. Luckily, Rickard's experience and familiarity with Kushan society gives them the reassurance that elephants are not hostile creatures, explaining to the others that Kushan society does not operate like common way in Midland. They should still look into treating them as fellow human beings regardless of difference. At that point, Mortar takes the opportunity to point out that there are no spirits in the area, which would be weird because we are too familiar with the Kushan, especially Ganishka's army, to implore practicing magic, adding the fact that Daiba, who is a wizard himself, was a general in said army, which says that the world of magic is not uncommon to their society. Gefren takes his opportunity to remind all the young mages that they are outsiders who have been allowed to set roots into Kushan lands, that their ways of practicing sorcery, and to never forget that Elf Island lives in their hearts. I think this little interjection by Gefren is very important, because it shows his wisdom when it comes to adapting to new situations. Morta, being the oldest of the fledgling mages, in her reaction, kind of says what the whole are thinking and not saying out loud. Therefore, and thankfully, Gefren was present to remind them to be thankful, and not other themselves just because they are not used to the ways of the world outside of Elfhelm. Thus why right after, he leads by example in thanking Rickard for ushering their safety and security now that they are forced to live in the living plane. Even though Rickard tries to be humble and says he does not do anything to merit praise. Gefren reiterates that living as magicians in the astral plane for so long that they have become too detached from the material. Basically, them being here gives them the opportunity to learn in a different environment similar to how Shirke was able to under Flora. As usual, Morta is defiant and drifts off on her broom from the rest of the pack. This also gives Farnese the opportunity to break off as well to check on Shirke, taking Serpico and Ishidro with her. In this moment, Rickard reflects on Salat's word at the end of 376, attack the Falcon of Light. And it seems to be conflicting for him. There is worry in his face, thinking that it may be too soon and early to go to war with Falconia. Maybe he is weary of battle, maybe he's grown fond of the Kushan and does not want them to be involved in war. But in the end, as he looks up at the palace with the sun shining down, he is worried that it may be too soon to involve Guts in the matter, which is understandable because 1, we do not know how long they have been in Kushan occupancy, And 2, it seems Salat is too hasty to use Guts and the mages as resources for their battle against the coming invasion of Falconia. Guts is still locked in a cell, and Shirke is still indisposed due to her still traveling in the astral form. Both have not recovered mentally and physically from the events of Elfhelm and being taken captive by Salat's regiment. In the next scene is Roderick accompanying Salat as the new Kushan Emperor and successor to Ganishka makes his entrance. Salat's face as he explains this information to Roderick does not communicate joy for this charade, and Roderick's face also shifts from mellow to more of a glare of suspicion, going on to ask Salat to explain what a Kurutai is, and Salat responds understanding why he does not know because it's a secret summit that takes place in Kushan Empire. Due to the fact that the Kushan and Berserk are based on a true historical empire in South Asia, I did my due diligence to research and see if what Salat was saying to Roderick is true, and to my surprise, yes, well, almost all true. While it is a gathering of leaders of different clans to meet and decide on policies and military action, Kurutai seems to be an adoption from Mongolian Turkic cultures to organize from how Kushan Empire functions in Berserk, in contrast to how tribalistic empires in Eurasia's past did. Thus, Ganishka's refusal to participate in the Kurutai and preferring dictatorship aiding in his demise. Roderick pries further into questioning Salat by asking how does the loss of Ganishka in the wave of the astral beings have not destabilized the Kushan Empire the same way it did Midland, right before Daiba interjects to signal that it's time for Kurutai to commence. Making their way into the round table for the summit, Salat gives a brief answer to sum up to Roderick, stating that their ways have always involved leaders being overthrown in ugly disputes, and thus since ancient times they have a long history of wars. The difference between now and then is the number of corpses, and not one of them would willingly kneel to demons, aka apostles. So now, it makes me wonder about Ganishka's term as acting emperor, because both Salat and Daiba served under him when he was an apostle. Of course, Daiba was aware, because he even aided in creating an artificial Behelit to create pseudo-apostles during their war campaign. Salat did not find out until he became suspicious, and Rakshas deliberately led him into the Tapasas to find out how Ganishka amassed such powerful soldiers. Given that he just said that they would never kneel to demons, it makes me wonder why no one knew Ganishka became an apostle, because it occurred when his son tried to overthrow him and he summoned the god hand by grabbing a Behelit in desperation. So you mean to say that no one, except for Daiba and his underlings, were aware of his abilities in being an apostle? After Salat's answer, Roderick gazes at the Kushan leaders and recognizes that Salat's words ring true. Looking at the Kushan, their presence seems to give off stern and battle-hardened energy, turning his stomach cold being the only outsider among potential enemies, proceeding to ask what he should do, and Salat informs him that due to him being from the West and royalty, allows him the ability to speak up during the summit. Also, that he's curious to know what Roderick proposes in planning to take down Griffith and Falconia. Thus, Jabba the Hutt, the new Kushan Emperor, signals the commencement of the Kurutai, now that all the clan leaders have been accounted for. In the next panel, we see one of the clan leaders' gaze fixated on Roderick, and immediately Daiba takes notice and signals to Salat that he overhears some chatter, and it seems things will not end well during this Kurutai. Salat is unfazed and says that it would suit him well if it doesn't, which leads to the same eavesdropper who happens to be the northern clan leader, raising his hand in attention to the Emperor and addressing the summit. He goes on to state that the gathering of all clan leaders would probably not have been successful if Ganishka was still in power, and that this will be a historical event. Nonetheless, he proceeds to point out Salat being the leader of the Bakiraka, sending the summit into a frenzy and vexing Salat as they are being told to be excluded. It seems although that Salat is royalty, his clan's reputation of being assassins for hire in the past does not help them be considered in such high regard in Kushan society. We even saw a glimpse of how other Kushan look at their clan during the convention arc. The other factions in Ganishka's army were still looking down on Salat for being a Bakiraka. In the midst of all the ruckus, another leader interjects to speak reason in the atmosphere, stating that they are here to discuss Kushan moving forward and not squabbling over trivial matters. He then proceeds to direct a statement towards the northern clan leader for his perspective, which doesn't sit well with some of the other clan leaders because they were opposed to the presence of the Bakiraka. The Emperor backs this leader who happens to be the new general of the Kushan army by silencing the crowd and permitting Salat and the Bakiraka to stay, while hammering down on the point that they have been divided before and now it is time to unite, especially against a new enemy in Falconia. Due to Ganishka's negligence to participate in tradition of the Kurutai that it shattered the stability of the Kushan Empire. Therefore, unity against the demons is a must. With that being said, he goes on to ask Daiba how this came about, being that he was Ganishka's general. Daiba proceeds to explain all that went down during their time in Midland, and the amount of shock on the Emperor's face is reflected in the confusion of the Kurutai. They all were not in the know of what was going on in Ganishka's campaign to conquer Midland and how he met his demise at the hands of Griffith. It seems that Daiba cut no corners and just spilled the beans because even Salat found what he did to be reckless, knowing none of them would be ready to digest the intricate details of demons, magic, and fantastical events that took place in the West. Apparently, not even Salat, given what he witnessed in Falconia, was in the know of the full details, but with the shock in the air, takes the opportunity to make a bold move, leaping to land in front of the Emperor while making a bold request that he be given the rank of general in order to lead the Kushan army to victory against Falconia, harboring on the point that they are well versed in military and magic arts, making them well suited to lead the war campaign against the magic might of Griffith and his army. Yet as usual, here comes the northern clan leader leading the opposition to Salat, stating to the Emperor they are fabricating and being sophisticated and to be careful not to become their puppet in all of this. Some of the others are shocked by his words and find it to be an insult, and for some reason those words trigger something in the northern clan leader. As he struggles to repeat the word, his body trembles until it reveals that sharp black masses are protruding out of his back. As he shouts in agony, slamming his hand down on the war table, Daiba senses the evil aura and urges everyone to get away from him as spikes fly out of the northern clan leader's body towards the other council members. Immediately, the Black Swordsman crew along with Morda sense the disturbance, urging Farnese to head outside and see what is happening. Even in his cell, Guts' brand starts to bleed and we see his face tenses up trying to resist the pain. Right under that panel, it is revealed that it's Rakshas with a broken mask violently clawing himself out of the northern clan leader's body until his full body is revealed to the summit ending 377. I am unsure as to why the word insult or phrase an insult triggered the reappearance of Rakshas, but it might have to do with how he has been viewed as an apostle demon, or due to being an exiled member of the Bakiraka. Or it could be due to his last encounter with Salat and Rickard for slapping fire at a Griffith, which was viewed by Locust as an insult, and possibly his existence as well is an insult. Therefore, it activated him to resume his hunt for whom got in his way in Falconia. Immediately in the beginning of chapter 378, we start at the concluding events of the last chapter, with a different perspective on Rakshas violently exiting the body of the northern clan leader, exemplifying to us the reader how brutal and shocking it was to be witnessed, bursting out of his bag like a xenomorph, one tendril at a time, and leaping with blazing speed up in the air to free himself. In the next page, we see Rakshas levitating just above the war table, sporting his newly broken mask during Rickard's escape from Falconia, and the previous mask he wore that was sliced in half by Salat on his hip. Even though Salat calls out his name, we can see that he is confused as he swerves his head side to side in confusion. We get confirmation of this by his dialogue while scanning the atmosphere, asking to himself, "What am I?" Although he recognizes the Kushan and Prince Salat, then and only then does his memory return as he reminisces of his last encounter being hit by Rickard's rocket launcher in Falconia. The most interesting part of this is that he states and confirms what most Berserk fans have been wondering since the Millennium Falcon arc, is that the rocket launcher actually killed Rakshas. Thus now he is in a state of confusion, specifically as to how he is alive after that encounter. His presence seems to be freaking out all the Kushan, screaming in terror which annoys Rakshas, lashing out in anger to silence all the noise so he can think, but luckily he is met with swift resistance from Bakiraka scouts who disguise themselves as servants pointed out by the apostle. This time, it seems their weaponry is more than a match for an apostle, as they cleave right through Rakshas' claws with ease. This is pretty awesome to see because majority of the time, most of the scout underlings of Salat have always been shown as cannon fodder, but these must be the elite of the bunch. Their technique and confidence in attacking a demon apostle while the other soldiers cower in fear says a lot about their progression since being in Midland. As soon as the Emperor is escorted to safety, the Bakiraka, Roderick, and Royal Guardsmen prepare to go on the offense, with Salat leading the charge. Daiba instructs the warriors to not be careless just because they have him outnumbered, because at the end of the day, this is an apostle that can take down 1,000 men, and Roderick adds for Salat to keep his composure as well. As Rakshas readies his attack, a gust of wind blows out in the middle of the room towards the warriors, and on the next page, we see a twister coming down on the palace. Daiba nervously mentions that this aura signifies that the astral gates are activating, and simultaneously in the capital, we see the emergence of a tar-like substance, and it looks like the new creatures are appearing to terrorize the Kushan populace. Even though they kinda look like gremlins or maybe even goblins, I'm presuming that these might be trolls, but then again, they look nothing like the trolls that Meteor designed, but we shall see. As trolls usually do, they attack, maul, and massacre in a pack. In the next panel, Farnese is making her way towards the ruckus and does a full stop when she sees the rampaging trolls coming out of the black malice on the ground. And right before they attack her, Serpico interjects with a wind slash. Serpico asks Farnese exactly what we all were thinking, and she confirms our suspicions that these are indeed trolls, even though their visages seem to be different. She also informs that there is a Qliphotha domain manifesting nearby in the palace, and they make way over there. Cutting to Daiba reflecting on what could have the ability to summon so many demons at once, and that it would be beyond the abilities of a dumb apostle, which I presume he's referring to Rakshas. We are given visuals of trolls confronting our heroes in different areas and leaving dead bodies in their wake, thinking probably that it must be a God-Hand member, and I'm sure he is thinking Griffith, but before he could finish his thought, possessed elephants barge into the summit going on a rampage, swatting and stomping on any soldier or scout in the way, giving Rakshas all the opportunity to focus on Salat, who loses his composure, and they both go at one another, commencing an epic battle for assassin supremacy. Meanwhile, Gut seems to be struggling in his cell and looks as if he is about to pass out, and concluding the chapter. There's a lot to unpack here between both chapters. A bit of a coming together of outcasts that I felt in these recent events. Salat and the Bakiraka being ostracized by the people of their homeland due to the nature of their cultural practices. Roderick being the only Western nobleman in the midst of former enemy territory. Daiba being a former general of the previous emperor and now serving Salat. Not to mention Rickert and the mages from Elfhelm also being outcasts. Chapter 377 and 378 have shone a big light on Kushan civilization as an open-minded and accepting society, unlike in Midland, where outsiders were not taken in and given free reign to assimilate. Up until Griffith started his new campaign to build the foundation of Falconia, of course. We also have a great opportunity to examine the unlimited potential and Femto's ability to manifest outcomes by this particular instance with the reappearance of Rakshas, who according to his words was supposed to be dead, but he suddenly reappears coincidentally in the middle of the first Kurultai where all the clan leaders and new emperor are gathered in one area and a Qliphotha reemergence takes place, similar to Elfhelm. How and when Rakshas's essence was placed in the northern clan leader's body as a mold to disrupt the Kushan Empire's military stability happened. How and when did Femto organize this? I'm looking forward to 379, especially since Kurosaki has mentioned on Twitter that the chapter is complete. They're just waiting for it to be published. I'm anticipating a great clash of titans between Salat and Rakshas, a battle of wit, clever tricks, and martial skill. Let me know in the comments what you all are anticipating for chapter 379 and when do you expect the release date to be. If you enjoy my review and analysis of Berserk chapters, please go ahead and leave a like so that others like you can find my content in the algorithm. Don't forget to subscribe and stay tuned for more reviews and video essays coming down the pipeline. You know the vibes. It's Kaizoku Sleven. Appreciate you.